Hi, this video will demonstrate how to solve an absolute value equation, okay? All right, so I have basically done 3 examples. And what we do on absolute value equations is we have to break them down into 2 equations, okay? The first one we're just going to write as is. So drop our absolute value and just write it as is. 3x minus 4 equals 7. And now the second one we're going to change the positive on the right-hand side to a negative. So the second equation is 3x minus 4 equals negative 7. And now once we get the 2 problems set up, we're going to just solve them. So we'll end up with 2 values actually. Here to isolate my x, I'm going to add 4 both sides. I get 3x equals 11. To isolate x, I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I get that x equals 11 over 3. But now that's just one solution. Here I'd solve and add 4 both sides. Okay? I'd get 3x equals minus 3. Divide both sides by 3, and I'd get that x equals negative 1. Let's check. If I plug in 11 over 3, the 3's would cancel. I'd get 11 minus 4 would be a positive 7. The absolute value of positive 7 is 7. And now let's plug in negative 1. 3 times negative 1 gives me negative 3 minus 4 would be a negative 7. Take the absolute value, I get positive 7. So both of these are solutions, okay? So remember on absolute value, you will have 2 solutions and you want to set them up. First, drop your absolute value signs and just write the equation as is. And then secondly, you want to write the left-hand side as is, or the left-hand side in the absolute value as is, and change the sign on the right-hand side. So it's going to be positive, we'll make it negative. Okay? Now here's a watch out. Your first step on all of these should be to isolate your absolute value on one side, okay? And now when you isolate your absolute value, which I've done here, if it is equal to a negative value, then there will be no solution. Why is that? Can you ever take an absolute value and get a negative number? No. Absolute value by definition is a positive number, okay? All right? So you can never take an absolute value and get a negative number. So if you isolate your absolute value on the left-hand side and you have that it's equal to a negative value, then there is no solution. But there's a watch out. You want to make sure that you isolate your absolute value before you jump to conclusions. So let's look at my third example. Here, just looking at it, oh, I see I have a negative sign on the right-hand side. But this actually does have a solution. What I haven't done is isolate my absolute value on the left-hand side. All right, here's my absolute value. So my next step will be to add 4 both sides in order to isolate my absolute value. I'd get the absolute value of 3x plus 7 in this case is equal to a positive 3. Well, this does have a solution. I can take an absolute value and get a positive 3. All right? So be careful not to jump to conclusions at the start of the problem. And now if I was left with this, we would break it down into 2 different problems just like we did before. The first one we write as is, dropping our absolute value, 3x plus 7 equals 3. And the second one we write what's in the absolute value and change the sign on the right-hand side. So now I can solve these. I'd subtract 7 each side and get 3x equals minus 4. And one of my solutions would end up being x equals minus 4/3. Over here I'd subtract 7 both sides. I get 3x equals negative 10. Divide both sides by 3. And my second solution would be that x equals negative 10 over 3. So again, remember, we want to isolate our absolute value on one side, and if we're left with a negative number on the right side, or on the other side, I should say, there will be no solutions. If we get it set up and there's a positive value on the right-hand side, then we break it down into 2 problems. One, we're just going to write as is. The second one, we're going to write what's in the absolute value and change the sign on the other side.